So I think most of us have already joined. I see a few more people joining, but I believe we can slowly start with today's session. Before we start, just wanted to share a few general housekeeping rules and infos. So basically all attendees are on mute. If you need or want to ask any questions, please use the chat box. We will monitor it throughout the webinar and answer all your questions as we come to our Q&A session at the end. I hope all of you can hear me and see me properly. And yeah, at the end, this session is being recorded. So we can share the recording with all of you when the session is finished. We are doing it also on English because I'm really happy and glad I can say that we have today partners from all over the region. So all the way from Slovenia to Macedonia joining us. I welcome you all. Thank you for coming. And we are doing this on English just to be sure that everybody understands the content properly. So before we start today with today's topic, I just wanted to mention that we also have one webinar for 18th of February, which is, we will talk more about the security in general, so security for home and office from, let's say, much wider perspective than today. Today we are focused on a specific topic, which is endpoint protection. But on 18th, we will talk from a much wider perspective. We will talk about two different approaches you can take and solutions and technologies that we can all use or that can help you to protect your customers. The vendor will be completely, the webinar will be completely vendor agnostic. And some kind of underlying topic of the webinar will be play the game or change the rules, which specifically talks about two ways you can approach the security for home and office environments. So play the game would in general mean that you accept the infrastructure as it is and apply different security layers to protect your customers. Or change the rules would mean just to change the infrastructure, meaning here we'll talk about VDI solutions that can help you really simply and easily to transform the existing physical infrastructure into cloud infrastructure. So, but of course, we'll talk about all these topics more on 18th. So in case you haven't signed for the webinar, but would like to see it, please just sign on our webpage. And of course, if you can't attend, we will also share the recording for this one as well. So, yeah, as I said, the topic is focused on a specific security layer, which is endpoint protection, and we will talk about comparison between standard AV solution and next-gen AV solutions. But of course, if we want to protect ourselves properly, we also need to understand the current security trends and threat landscape. So according to latest marketing trends, which will be for Q4 2020, it seems ransomware is becoming predominantly a problem for small and medium-sized companies, as we can all see from the chart. So 36.5% of all attacks, ransomware attacks in Q4 2020 were focused on small business companies. That would be companies that have up to 100 employees. The main reason for that is that small business companies are more likely to have network structures that are not so complex and have simple access control policies that are not well maintained. So these companies also do not consider themselves prime targets for ransomware and are not taking the steps needed to keep themselves safe. of course, making them that way an ideal and easy target for all these attacks. 35.7 ransomware attacks were focused on medium-sized companies. So that would be the companies that have from 100 to 1,000 employees. So these are all mid-market companies. And the reason why are they so popular is that they are most likely to pay for the ransom. And considering that average ransom demand for Q4 2020 was $154,000, then yeah, it doesn't surprise that small businesses are not so eager to pay this type of ransomware. So, but what is the blueprint? How do we, how do the most of these attacks happen? So, the most common attack vectors for all these ransomware attacks are email phishing, RDP compromises, and software vulnerabilities. So it's not so surprising. The problem with most of the ransomware is the fact that they are not always using malicious code in the attack. So some of them use commercial full disk encryption software and, for example, bootlocker programs, which in a way service as their ransomware node to the attack victims. So that's what actually makes ransomware so dangerous and popular, on the other hand, for the attackers. It is also worth to mention that most of ransomware attacks are generally lazy and opportunistic by its nature, meaning that attackers do not necessarily spend much time to launch these attacks or to target a specific companies or people for whatever reason. They just launch the attacks and hope for some easy profit. And yeah, that brings us to the next interesting trend. So as we see a big increase is in increase in software as a service business model. In this way also we see ransomware as a service business model becoming more and more popular. The model itself is pretty easy. So basically what happens is that the ransomware developer creates custom exploit code that is then in a way, let's say, licensed to a ransomware attacker or affiliate for a special fee or a share in profit from attack. The affiliate then updates their hosting site where the malware, where the ransomware is located with the code, and identifies the targets and infection vectors. So in most cases, this will be an email, because it's easy to come to the email addresses of the companies. I mean, there are a lot of companies that even provide it as a service. In our region, maybe one of the most popular is Biznode. But there are a lot of companies that offer this, so it's not so hard to get these informations. And it gives you really big footprint and easy access to organization. And of course, the bigger organization, the bigger chances that someone will click the link and come to a malicious website with the code, download the ransomware, which is then executed on the computer. And then the fun starts. The ransomware, of course, encrypts the victim's files, identifies additional targets on the network, modifies system configurations to establish persistence, and disrupts or destroys data backups. Then the victim, of course, receives a note and has a chance to pay or not. If they do pay, which is, of course, not recommended, the money launderer will move the money through multiple transformations to obscure the identities of both the developer and the attacker, and then maybe victim gets decryption keys, maybe not. What's really important to note about this, there are several really interesting things. So the first thing about ransomware as a service business model is from the perspective of developer. So developer can actually create the malware, and deploy it and make some money without technically participating in any illegal activities. So that's in a way a really big plus for them. On the other hand, that also means that you do not need a special developer expertise to launch the attack. You don't need to have a big financial, let's say, power to do it also, because as mentioned, you can actually get the ransomware itself for free and then share the profit from the attack with the developer itself. So this whole thing only makes it easy and increases the possibility of ransomware attacks that are at the moment out there, which of course then makes it much harder to protect the environments of our customers. But also, what's really important to mention, the ransomware is not the only threat out there that we need to be worried about. So, as we know, legacy antivirus is based on signatures and static artificial intelligence engines to recognize malicious files before they run on the system. I'm sure that most of us that are on the session today know what signatures are, how they function, but just for the sake of conversation, I will give more details. So basically, signatures are reactive protection. Signatures usually are made by hashing algorithms, which scan the file, and based on the data of the file, of the binary footprint of the file, it creates a signature, which is actually a hash that is unique and specific for the for this special file. So this is reactive protection. So basically, you are lucky if a signature already exists in your antivirus database. But that is the case. It also means that the malware. But if that's the case, it also means that malware has already made some damage, and somebody else already got hurt. So when it comes to signature, there is also a small, let's say, religious component to this protection, meaning that you are actually hoping and praying that you do not get hit first. Besides signatures, AV companies use several other methods for discovering malware. So one of, let's say, common discovery methods involves executing files in sandbox environments and observing for malicious behavior. Another common discovery method would be scanning for the code, for the common signs of, let's say, some kind of malicious intent or malicious content. But newer malware will or is able to detect a sandbox environment and remain quiet in the sandbox environment, only to attack once they are back in live environment. So this quite doesn't help much. Also, another method to avoid AV engines involves packers, or which use either encryption or other compression technologies that prevent someone from seeing what is actually within the file. And also, malware creators can or may wrap the malicious code with benign code within a file to hide the bad content. So here we have mentioned only few of malware types that are pretty interesting and can actually avoid current antivirus technologies. So we have here polymorphic malware, which is malware that actually can detect when it is detected by antivirus and completely regenerate itself using different characteristics. So meaning basically what they do is they change their signature so that it's not detected by antivirus anymore. We have weaponized documents that are really also interesting, where the attacker hides the code or script within those weaponized documents. It looks harmless even to the trained eye, and will slip past most of the antivirus because antivirus only scans for the initial document rather than the code or a script after it executes. So then that actually means that the attack, once launched, can run in the background without the user knowledge. Also, what's really interesting and dangerous is especially is browser drive-by downloads and fileless attacks. So as we already mentioned, the current antivirus technologies use signatures to check whether the file is malicious or not. So in order to do that, actually, there has to be a file to start with. So if you don't have a file on the system, then there's actually nothing to scan, compare, or check. Fileless attacks, what they do is actually what they don't download a payload to endpoint computer. They execute themselves straight in the memory of endpoint. So technically there is nothing on the endpoint hard drive that the standard AV products can scan and check for signatures, compare, or whatever else. So that's really, really advanced type of attack, and one that's, let's say, most efficient, because these fileless attacks occur without installing an actual payload on the system. They're typically executed in endpoint memory and use PowerShell, run DLL32X, or any other built-in system resources to infect the machine. So how does it actually work? How does protection work? So traditional antiviruses work in pre-execution framework. So if the signature exists, the AV will block the file. If not, some of them will use the sandbox or try to scan the code as additional security layer or zero-day protection, but they do not actually monitor what happens after the file is executed. As I said, they're definition-based, so yeah, they can only detect the threats they know about. They offer some sort of zero-day protection, but what's really important is to focus on process itself. So process has to be monitored for malicious activity, and processes spawned by the original process also has to be monitored in order to determine whether there is some kind of malicious behavior or not. And as we see, for example, in 2018 only, 82% of small and medium-sized businesses that experienced the cyber attack say that it evaded their antivirus solutions. So that's 82%. That's not a small number. So what we actually need to do, of course, quarantine and kill is still a part of any pre-execution detection and remediation technology. It's really important part. But other protections are necessary to remediate threats not discovered as malicious until they start messing around with the environment. So we need some way of controlling the file system. Option of a file system rollback would be really good to have. Protection of volume shadow copies, as we mentioned with ransomware. When it comes to the system, what it does is encrypts the data, it destroys the backups and so on to cover it tracks, and that's why it would be really useful to have this volume shadow copy protection as well. Also, to revert all the changes within the registry, to isolate the PC from the network, to contain the spread. And what would be also really useful and good to have is in a way to see the attack history as it happened, just to know what actually is affected and what is not. So when we think about, or we talk about, let's say, standard remediation process, so you get a phone call from your customer that says, hey, listen, I have a small issue. It seems something's going on in the network. We might be impacted by the ransomware. the steps that you would, of course, usually do is shut down the device completely, just power off, not shut down nicely through Windows shutdown option, just pull the plug from the electricity, disconnect it from the network to secure the to contain the spread, let's say that way. You would have to do forensic analysis to determine the impact of the threat, because when the customer calls, when call already came, that doesn't necessarily mean that the attack and the threat happened right now. It just means that the customer right now noticed something is happening, but the question is how long is the malware or the ransomware already in the customer network, and what kind of damage it has done. So it's really important to analyze and determine the scope and the impact of the threat. So, of course, check other parts of the network and other devices. Wipe the devices that have issue, boot them with a complete new image, and check the backup and restore for missing files. So of course you have to restore the customer's data. Hopingly they have some kind of backup, but even with this, let's say, best case scenario, it depends on, of course, RPOs, return point objective, how much of the data will be lost. For sure there will be a small loss, but that's something in these scenarios you really can't avoid. And according to latest reports, average days of downtime for a customer would be around 21 days. Of course, again, it depends on the scope and the damage that ransomware actually, or malware actually made to the network. So what do actually next generation AVs offer, and how do they help us to tackle this type of situations? So basically, first of all, from protection side, they monitor process. Instead of just analyze the file, they monitor behavior of the file, what it does within the system, what kind of changes it does also, and based on that, they execute certain actions, as we will see later. And also what they can do is actually they can record the changes that were done to the endpoint, which actually makes it much easier for an IT service provider to remediate these issues. So instead of having only a static artificial intelligence, we also have behavioral AI engines. We can monitor and prevent any execution from malicious documents and scripts. What's really, really important, and I have to really, mention additionally, is these fileless exploits that are so hard to prevent. Next generation AVs actually can prevent this type of attacks, because they can detect that something's going on, that some process is being executed, and that some kind of malicious activity is going on the device, and which is really, really important. Also, we can control lateral movement with disconnecting devices from the network automatically when the malware hits. We can also apply quarantine kill and do the rollback of all changes to the system. So I think it's always better to show it live, how it actually works. Just give me a moment to bring up my other screen. So I hope you see my dashboard. So basically this is endpoint detection and response solution that's integrated within RMM. This is a Sentinel-1 product. Here we can see a main dashboard. This is a demo environment, so we don't see that much of data here. But what's really important to see is policies and threat analyze. So I will skip to the policies just to give you an idea what actually EDR does for you, how it makes your life much easier and helps you prevent all these problems. So this is a standard policy. It's pretty easy to understand. It's not complicated. Basically, you can do different policies for different customers depending on the environments, depending on the needs of the customer. But this is all that it takes to be set up. So as any other antivirus technology, EDR can operate in two modes. It can operate in detect only and in protect mode. Detect only mode is actually really useful because it helps you to analyze client's environment before you actually deploy the protection. The environment will still be protected, but what it gives you an idea what kind of false positives will happen within a certain environment. For example, if the customer uses some kind of, let's say, legacy applications or similar software, they might be, because of their, of course, nature, they might be targeted or marked as a suspicious activity. But what you can do actually is run EDR in the detect-only mode, detect all the applications that are valid when they are detected as suspicious, and whitelist them or put them on exclusion lists. And once you're sure that customer environment is fine, that there will not be any unnecessary shutdowns, you can turn to protect mode. So on the right side, you will see the artificial intelligence engines that are being used to protect customer environments. So these are all AI engines. There is also option of using reputation based protection, meaning signatures. That's also there because, yeah, why not? I mean, it exists. It's not something that EDR is based on. It's not something that is, primary focus, but it's also useful to have. Why not? The second two filters are actually pre-execution filters. So these are deep file inspectors that can analyze the file as it comes to the system and check does it contain anything suspicious, or does it have any other markings of a malware or ransomware. All other engines are actually post-execution engines. So these are engines that actually check what a certain process is doing to the system once it's executed. We can also monitor for any weaponized documents and scripts within those documents. We can also monitor for lateral movement of the threat. Also check for any fileless attacks. And there are also additional filters which you can, of course, enable or disable depending, as I say, on customer environments. For example, this specific filter is a static IA engine that's for Mac devices. So if a customer has them, you can also deploy additional filters. What's really important, to note that the protection levels that EDR solutions offer. So normally you will have kill and quarantine and some kind of, let's say, remediate action with standard antivirus products as well. But Rollback is a feature that's specific for EDR products. Rollback works in cooperation with volume shadow copy. And it works in a way that, for example, of course, in order for Rollback to work, you have to have snapshots active. And also you have to have anti-tamper option active. So when you have this active as it is, this means that on a specific device, volume shadow copy for that device will be additionally protected with additional security layer from Sentinel-1. So what a Sentinel-1 or EDR does here is they create a special encrypted volume shadow copy that's only accessible by Sentinel-1, and it uses it for any rollback functionality that or actions that they need to take. So whenever something happens to the endpoint when a suspicious activity is detected, You can also use option of disconnecting the endpoint from the network. Instead of doing it manually after the customer calls you, EDR does it for you automatically whenever suspicious activity is detected. This would disconnect the computer from the network, but it would only leave option of communication Sentinel-1 EDR dashboard with the endpoint agent. So you will still have communication with that endpoint, but the rest of the endpoint would not be able to go to the network. And then, of course, in this case, when you detect suspicious activity, disconnect the device from the network. If you have rollback option active, EDR can automatically roll back all the changes that were made to a specific system since the threat was registered. So now I will just show you how it actually looks. What type of information can you see when a threat is detected on a specific device? So we have here a few examples. As I said, this is our lab environment. So I will just choose one. So you can actually already here see the list of, let's say, threats that were detected. And also you can see the classification. So whether it's some kind of hack tool, a malware, or whatever, a backdoor, whatever. Also, sometimes there will be false positives, which you can then mark as a false positive and put them on exclusion list. So when we go to a specific, let's say, threat or an incident, we can see actually what happened within the system. So we can see, okay, when was this first seen on a specific system? When was it last seen? What kind of actions were done by the EDR? Where exactly on the disk was this located? Some kind of basic information about the file itself. You will also see here information about network. So did the incident spread across the network or not? And you can see some kind of notes and threat indicators. So for example, this here threat was detected by a static engine. So it recorded that a new root certificate was added, suspicious registry key was created, and any other action that actually happened after the threat was detected. So if we want to explore a little bit further, we can always check the timeline. So exactly how this incident happened. So first it was detected by engine. Then right away what EDR did is roll back all the changes that this process did, just to be sure that everything's fine. It updated the threat status, and here the threat was mitigated by classifying or killing the threat and classifying it as a malware. If we want to see more details, we can also check what exactly was happening with the process itself. So when we click on the process, we can actually see that this process spawned another process. And actually there was altogether 13 processes that were spawned. We can see all the events that were created and all the details about the process. So the path of the process. What's also interesting when we check their spawn processes, we are also able to see any commands that were executed within the client endpoint. And we can load, of course, all other processes that were also spawned and see how did process actually move throughout the environment, which is actually really useful to determine the scope of the threat. So here what is really important is when this kind of situations happen is to determine whether the incident is related to a specific device? If so, what kind of damage did it do? What kind of changes did it do to the device? And if the process itself managed to move laterally through the network. And with this type of forensics and options of analyzing the incident, it makes it much more easier for IT service providers to detect, or let's say to find out what was the scope of the incident itself. So one of the really cool functions of EDR, is its rollback option. So we unfortunately can't show the rollback feature itself live, but we already have a recording from a previous webinar. So I can actually, it's really short. I can share with you just so you can see what actually happens in real time within the environment when a threat is detected by Sentinel-1. So this is an example of one virtual machine that was, of course, created for these purposes of testing. The machine itself is patched. It has latest updates. It's pretty secure. So what we will do here is we will just copy one type of weaponized document to the desktop. And of course, Sentinel-1 will automatically detect this threat and remove it, remediate it. So when we go back to Sentinel-1 dashboard, what we can see is actually that, yeah, something happened. There was an incident. We can see all the actions that were, made. So we can see that it's killed and quarantined. And we can see more details. This is a little bit older dashboard. The one that we showed is a little bit newer, so it looks a little bit different, but basically the data is the same. You can actually see in-depth data about the threat itself. So in order to show how rollback function works, we have to first disable Sentinel-1, put it into detect only mode, which means that it will detect the threat, but it will actually do nothing to remediate the threat. So we can actually execute the file itself on the system. So the process is the same. Just copy the file. This time, let's say the threat was detected. We will execute the file because we think it's something really important and interesting to open. And as soon as we click on the yes, fun things will start to happen to the environment. So we can see all the files being encrypted. And in a few seconds, we will have the message with information about how to pay the ransom and how to get your data back. So now, having this, we can go back to our Sentinel-1 dashboard and check what Sentinel-1 actually discovered. So we can again see the threat. I will just for a second stop or pause the video here because this happens really fast. So we are here on 2 minutes and 33 seconds. I'm sorry. So the threat was detected within the console. Right away, service provider is notified about the threat, of course. And what you can do now is do the rollback of all the changes that were done to this endpoint. So we are on 233. So we will press the rollback feature, go back to the endpoint, and the same second we will see how the endpoint actually changes back to its normal state. Of course, this is a test machine, it's a demo machine, it's pretty light, it has only few files, basically these few pictures that we are here seeing, but still it took only 14 seconds, maybe even a little less, to get the device back to its normal state, which is pretty impressive. Of course, if it's a productive machine with more data, it would take a little bit more. But from, let's say, some kind of IT service provider perspective, all that it was needed was to press the rollback button to start the process of returning the machine to its normal state. And if we remember, I will just switch us back to the presentation. If we remember, we mentioned that average it took 21 days for the companies to recover from this type of attacks, compared to a few seconds or a few hours. That's a really big difference. So what are actually the benefits of this type of technology? Of course, the benefits for the customers, but in a way also for IT service providers, for us, are that we can detect undetectable. So we can protect in online mode and on offline mode. This means that because it uses artificial intelligence and behavior analysis, EDR product, EDR solution doesn't have to be connected to the internet. They don't need to have access to definitions database. They will protect the device, and even if the device is out of order for 3-6 months, and then you plug it in back to the internet, and all these malware types start hitting your device, your device will still be protected, because it uses detection or behavioral analysis and process injection to detect the threats. So, of course, as we've seen, we have reduced downtime with better detection, faster recovery through rollback remediation. We are also protected outside of the company networks, so in home office environments or in public network environments. So we don't have to worry about where we are to be protected properly, which is a really big thing that we need to mention here also, that Sentinel-1 solution is so good that actually ransomware protection is guaranteed. So Sentinel-1 guarantees protection from ransomware to all of its partners and clients. Here you see in the lower left corner there is actually a link, but I have, just a moment, I think I can copy the link to a chat. Actually, I will do it later in Q&A sessions, not too complicated. So there is a link to a PDF which we will share with you, which describes how Sentinel-1 actually guarantees the ransomware protection. So in a way, they take a little bit burden from the IT service provider and help them, against this, help them to provide adaptive self-learning detection for next generation threats, and in a way make them help them sleep better, both IT service providers and customers. Specifically for IT service providers, there are several benefits here. So you can really set yourself apart from other IT companies, especially when you can guarantee ransomware protection. You can also mitigate leapfrog attacks. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Honda security incident when leapfrog attacks were used, but basically we're talking about lateral movement throughout the network, which can be, of course, mitigated by disconnecting the device from the network once the threat was detected. So what you can actually offer is faster recovery times. So this in the end saves your time. As we have seen, normally when you have to go through the incident response, the steps you need to do to actually to detect the scope of the incident, to remediate the incident, to bring back customer environment to a fully functional state, that really takes some time, and it's not always a guarantee that you will be able to return to a state that it was before, or that you will be able to return all the data that were lost by encryption or the attack. Really positive thing is that this type of technology you can use on every endpoint. So Mac, Linux, Windows, it covers everything. And as I said, it helps you see a full story of what actually happened to the customer environments. So that being said, if you want, you can always sign up for a live demo for EDR. You can get a free trial for 30 days to test within your environment or your customer environments. We will post the link in the chat window. And anyone who wants to test the EDR product, just type trial, and we will make sure that you get your free 30 days trial account so you can test the product. But also, if you prefer and if you like, we can also help you to set up the environment and help you with the demo itself. So that being said, we came to our Q&A session. So Jurica, can you please check the chat box? Did we already have received some questions?
Not at the moment.
So I will use this moment just to share the links that I promised that I want to share with you guys. I will just switch screens. So first link that I wanted to share with everyone is Sentinel-1 ransom warranty PDF, which is a really cool document. You can check it out. Second that I wanted to share with everybody is a registration link where you can register for a trial. Oh. So still no questions are coming, Jurica?
No.
Yeah, okay, not a problem. So the links are in the chat boxes. Please use them. And in case you need any additional help or info, please let us know. So as I said, this session is being recorded, so we will share the recording with you afterwards. We can also share the slides. If anybody is interested in slides, just please let us know. And in case you have any additional questions about this topic afterwards, please feel free to contact us. And yeah, so thank you all for your time today. Wish you all a nice day, and hope to see and speak to you soon. Have a nice day. Bye all.